5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire. The only thing we have to fear is fear.
Mile 18.
This is Endurance Nation.
Hey there, welcome to the Endurance Nation podcast. My name is Patrick McCran and I'll be your host. Every week I break down a different topic on endurance sports, training, racing, strategy, using Endurance Nation's 4 key values of consistency, community, camaraderie, and competition. Being an endurance athlete is not easy. You're juggling many different things, including time, resources, money, travel, work, life. It gets stressful at times, but what we do inside Endurance Nation is break things down to their basic building blocks. Make sure that you can put them into practice, whether you're training or racing, to make you a fitter, faster, and smarter athlete. We've been doing this since 2007 and helped thousands of athletes just like you reach their own personal best and the finish line that they've been chasing for a very long time. We look forward to helping you here on this podcast, but you can also follow us online at endurancenation.us, or if you're looking for a specific topic, just Google Endurance Nation and the topic. I'm sure we've got something. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Endurance Nation.
Hey everyone, Coach Patrick here from Endurance Nation, back with my co-conspirator Matt Limbert for the 4th episode, the 4th edition of the DudeGuy podcast. This is a complimentary podcast to what we normally do inside Endurance Nation, where all of our content is really focused on you, the user, making sure that you're informed, making good decisions, learning new ways to sort of reframe your training or racing, just overall making you a smarter, faster athlete. But with DudeGuy, we're kind of flipping the script a little bit and having a bit more fun. This is a chance for us to talk about some of the hot news topics of the day, break it down a little bit, share our perspectives on it, hopefully make you smile while you're doing your run or your workout. Maybe even, maybe you'll learn something. I don't know. Like maybe you want to subscribe to the podcast, right? Or maybe you want to tell a friend about the podcast, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So it's Friday. So TGI DudeGuy Friday. How you doing, Matt? How you feeling?
Doing good. I'm doing good. Squeezed my ride in before the DudeGuy podcast, so I'm stoked about that.
Did you do a Zwift start and a real life ride after? What was that?
Yeah. So I'm trying to do a mock stage race for because I got some stage racing coming up, and so I rode hard on the trainer for an hour, and then I went out and rode some wet trails, tried to not destroy stuff for another 2. So yeah, do some. Yeah, so I tried to kill myself on Zwift, and then like the start of the race when everybody goes stupid hard because people just seem to do that, and then go out and ride some trail. Yeah, so hybrid ride.
Okay, little hybrid ride. That's good. I can't. That just seems too logistically complicated for me. Like I get it from an execution standpoint because like get all the good work done, indoors, safe, no issues, no logistics, and then just go ride. But to me, I'm like, that just seems like too much of a pain. One day I'll get there, I guess. You definitely bring the complicated to the race scene. Other people are like, I think I might do a race. And you're like, I'm going to do a 3-day, 3-part race where the first part does this and the second part does that. Is that because you like 1-day races are just kind of like, like you just bored, or what's the story there?
I guess I like the challenge of going the couple days in a row, and then, it's a little bit more interesting. I guess it's a little more interesting. Plus, you just get to ride a lot, so like, there's nothing wrong with that,
That's true.
And so the cross country guys, like if they're going cross country mountain bike, are typically 2 or 3 hours, and they go super hard out the gate. Typically, like a Zwift ride. I think it becomes a little bit more interesting, especially on a stage race. I think one race director said, everybody's a hero until day 3. And then, that's when the fatigue catches up with people. And like, if you haven't been eating stages and if you went too hard. So that's why stage 4 and 5 are kind of more my jam.
I see. Interesting. All right. Sounds like a plan. I love it. All right, well, let's dive into the DudeGuy podcast. All right, so we have some topics for today. I only have one. I failed miserably this time around. I wrote it down like midweek, and I'm like, I'm so ahead of the game. I wrote down my DudeGuy podcast topic, and I didn't write anything else down. Failure. How about you? How many topics do you have?
Got one that was submitted from our community, and then I got one that we can probably recycle from next week unless you're going to pick it.
Okay.
Then we'd really only be down to 2 topics.
Boo. Well, there's a dude and a guy. Like 2 topics kind of fits the mold, but that's all right. We're unsatisfied with that. We do try and keep things on schedule, but more topics sometimes the better. Okay. What's the topic from the community? I saw you posted. I was pretty pumped about that.
Yeah. So we asked our community about what they would want to hear about. So they were specifically interested in like, how do you get into a flow state for mountain biking? And I thought that was interesting relative to mountain biking, because it's a thing now at least. But I think you could use that same question about like, hey, how do you get into flow state so it just doesn't happen randomly for any workout, right? Is that swimming, biking, running? I mean, the workout would be that much more enjoyable if you were in a flow state. So can you, what
interesting
things can you do to get into that state, more regularly, right? Rather than other stuff. And then the other topic would be, our benchmarking tests. So we did some homework with the data with our members, and came up with like a benchmarking test that would help folks for either half or full, and that's part of the plans for 2023. And we maybe talk about the homework that went into that and how that fits into training plans and stuff like that for 2023.
Awesome.
There you go. Two topics.
Two topics. All right.
What do you got?
I like them. I got the continuous glucose monitoring disqualification of Kristen Faulkner. From Strade Bianchi, and why does the UCI care about CGM? Do they just hate Super Sapiens, or is it like a real reason why we should keep glucose monitoring out of the Pro Peloton? Like, what's the story? So I do want to touch a little bit on that for sure too. So let's start off with the flow state part, then we'll go to the CGM, and then we see where we end up. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Let's go. Let's do it. Okay, so flow state. Well, first of all, like, I'm not going to make you say Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi's name. I remember him from grad school, and sort of who was the psychologist who kind of sort of defined and talked a little bit about what a flow state is. But just for like baseline DudeGuy talk, we're dudes, guys. What the hell does flow state mean to us? How would you DudeGuy explain flow state?
A flow state for me would be when I'm present in doing what it is, whatever the activity that I am doing is, right? So just say, for instance, for running, it would be where, I'm only thinking about running, and and it was relatively at least easier to me, and feel like I'm in rhythm and that I have control of my effort. I guess that's how I would simply describe it, is that like I'm very present and I'm very in control of my effort, and ideally things are clicking for me,
right?
But yeah, so how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think it's a great place to start. I think the present part is huge, right? So I think some people mistake flow state for, like, everyone has that sort of driving experience, especially for those of you at home who commute, where you just you leave the office and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm at home. And you're like, how did I get here? I don't really remember. I'm just home. That's not flow state. That's actually like crazy dangerous. Flow state, like you said, for me is when I'm running or cycling or swimming or whatever, is that all of a sudden I feel like I'm actually fully in control of what I'm doing. Like if I want to go a little bit faster, or I want to go to the side, or I want to just move over. I don't want to move over to the side of the road to dodge something, but I'm just going to just move over half an inch. Like I have all of a sudden the ability to be so much more in control of my experience, which is not normal, because usually there's, say on a bike, there's cars flying by you, there's weather, there's distractions, there's your power meter, there's probably some notifications coming in, we're sort of surrounded by noise. And for me, it's all of a sudden realizing I I'm here. Like I got here, and it's not a normal experience for me, I would say. It seems to happen maybe once a month or something like that. So I'm super curious to hear how you would kind of gamify that. Cause I think it's like there's a couple different things that are intersecting, right? You have to have like, there's probably mood is part of it. Energy level is another part of it. Like you're into the workout, right? You're excited about the session. You've got good energy for the day. You're not like dehydrated or picking the wrong fuel. Environmentally things are good. You're in like your happy place with like the place you pick to ride, for example, on your mountain bike. So how would you go about sort of making that work? Like what's your secret sauce for that? Or what's your suggestion?
Yes, my secret sauce for the way I like to approach it is that like I like to have like a key phrase or like a mantra that kind of puts me in. It triggers me to kind of get into that state, right? So, so if I'm on, let's just say I'm doing I'm cycling or something like that, and it's a long, steady climb. And I noticed that I'm just kind of slugging away and it's hot and I'm like, I'm coming up with all the reasons why this is difficult, right? Which is not necessarily flow state, right? So I would,
that's another state that begins with F.
Yeah, recognize that you're not in flow state, right? So again, the first is becoming aware that you're not there, right? So step one, I'm not in flow state, right? You become aware. I'm distracted. I'm complaining. And then go to your mantra, right? So like maybe like you use the term diesel, right? I want to diesel up this thing. I'm just going to and then you kind of repeat that over, and like I would repeat that over and over in my head. Start with my breathing, make sure my breathing is, concentrate on my breathing. And then, I think the real secret sauce for me is that like before I even got on the bike, if I had any time, I would try to associate that word with some visualization, right? So then when I trigger that word, I kind of get into that state. So like the bike, I would think about like if I had some time, I would say, if I was going to use this diesel phrase, how do I want to feel when I'm in the diesel phrase? I want to have like a rhythmic breathing. I want to feel my cadence. I want to like make sure I would try to feel all the senses while I'm sitting in my chair or whatever, when I'm visualizing diesel. Right. So then when I'm on the bike and I trigger that word, then I can kind of get into that state and I'm like, oh, this is, I can kind of recognize like, okay, I want to get my breathing straight. I want to get my cadence straight. Like I just can reinforce that state. Right. So I'd say that for me, it's kind of like a 2-part thing or 3-part. One is recognizing I'm not in flow state, using a trigger phrase, and then how that phrase is supposed to make me feel. But I've done that homework before I got on the bike. So what about you?
Interesting. Well, for me, I think I would I'll maybe offer a counterpoint on the dude side, or maybe on the guy side. Maybe you're the dude. I feel like you're the dude because we're talking kind of Zen. Like, who's the dude, right? Like, everyone get the Big Lebowski on this weekend and watch it. I just got an idea for a logo. All right. Anyway, on my side, I think I try to get into a flow state with every session. But I do it for me, it's about narrowing it down, so it's like, oh, okay, so I've got to do this workout today with a session. Say I'm doing a run, what's the point of this run, or what am I trying to do in this run? So it would be super easy to do that in like an interval session where I'd say, oh, it's 2x1 miles. So I've got these miles is where I kind of have to get in my flow state. So I kind of have to use the beginning of the workout as I'm warming up is all of the wrestling that I need to get the stuff out of my head. Like I got to stop thinking about work for a second, or ideally I'm not late for something, which is, I don't know, pretty much my entire life. But if I'm not late for something, that's also another good sort of like success factor for getting into a flow state. And then doing what I need to do to get ready for that part of my workout. So I don't think flow state is something that needs to be like a forever thing. It's not like you leave your house and all of a sudden like everything gets quiet. And like your favorite song comes on and like all the cars part out of your way, and everybody's waving you through and giving you hand ups or whatever. Like, I think it's more just saying like, oh, there's like a space. So, for me, I try to use that interval space. Alternatively, if I can go to the same session, like people say, you ride the same when I ride here, locally outside, like people like you ride the same routes a lot. Like you don't really break it up. And every once in a while I do like an adventure ride or something. But for me, it's like, once I kind of get familiar with a place, I'm like, oh, this is my favorite, because I'm like, I know I turn left here and then I got the hill into the descent. If I can kind of get it just right at the bottom and there's, no debris then I can kind of take a turn and get into the thing. And then, so that's also part of it too. So if I don't have an interval, the location allows me to be like this one little segment, like people think about Strava segments. I would say that's kind of like a flow segment, or like, oh, this is like a great sort of uninterrupted spot of Zen, that if I can kind of get things to work. And sometimes it's close, like sometimes you're trying to make it happen and it doesn't happen, but for me, the outcome, like how I know in the outside. So we're talking about getting into it, but like sort of on the flip side of it, like the other side, like the flow state side for me is that the evidence that I was in flow state for me is just like, I'm really happy with that workout. And I can't really tell you why, right? I don't have a badge. I didn't pass a bunch of people, right? Like I didn't go by other cyclists who were like, oh my God. I just rode my bike, or went for a run. But afterwards, I'm just like amped, I'm like, that was just awesome. Like I feel great. And to me, that's a sign that I kind of hit it right. So it's kind of two different ways to think about it, because I think you could, as type A athletes, people will be like, oh, there's a flow state. Like, I was on level 2. I didn't realize there was a level 3. Like, I got to get the flow state. Like, how do I get the flow state? Like, I got to Google flow state. Now I got to find flow state. Then I put a post-it up on my door that says flow state. And my mantra is going to be flow state. And I'm going to be flow stating, and it's like, you'll be frustrating is what you'll be doing. No flow stating happening there. You'll be so upset about not getting into the flow state. And like, everyone else flow state. I went to Facebook. Everyone else says hashtag flow state. And I've got no flow state. This is so wrong, like what's happening, so that's not what it's meant to be. I think you start, for those of you listening at home who are like, what's this Zen crap? Like, it's just saying, like, for me, it's about being outside. Like I was talking about, like outside and elevated. So how do you observe yourself doing something? And then how would you advise yourself to get into that space? Right. So if you're really struggling with it internally, I think it's hard to get there, because it's an internal thing that has to happen. And if you're inside there wrestling inside the box, you can't make the box magical. So being outside to be like, oh, I'd be telling that person they need to like relax their hands and they've just got to take a deep breath and slow down. Because, I never do what I tell other people to do, but I should do it, right? I just don't do it. So I think part of that flow state is being able to sort of take yourself out of the moment that you're in right now. Like you have to, in order to get into the flow state, you can't be in the flow state trying to make the flow state happen. You've got to be sort of like outside and like a little bit relaxed, like in an observing position, I guess. I don't know. Like you can't muscle your way into a flow state, I guess, is the point, right?
Being able to isolate, you're not going to be in that state for maybe the entire workout, right? Like giving yourself that grace or that the ability to, when you're warm up, like that's the time you get to clear your mind of all the things. You're like, okay, I'm thinking about this. I'm late, like you mentioned, like, or it's windy or something like that. All the things that are going through your head that, that are the distraction stuff, and just kind of don't necessarily wrestle with it. Just let it go. All right. Just, think about those things and let those things go. And then, like you mentioned, either get to that segment on the course or to that part of the interval, and then really trying to be present about, that particular interval. And then during maybe the recovery, you just get all distracted again,
right?
Because it's,
yeah.
But yeah, I kind of like that.
Yeah. All right. So observe yourself, get out there, do some stuff, find your flow state, but don't force it. Right. Like, I think it's just one of those things. Like it's something you just would want to do. Like if I could have a fast run, then, I want to have everyone be fast, and that's just not sustainable. Right. And so when you have a good run, like I would just savor those days. Like those are magical, awesome days. Write it down in your notebook, put a star on it, like come back to it later and be like, oh, I had this awesome run, or share it with someone else. That's fantastic. Right. Or save it, because sometimes you need it for the days when it's crummy outside and you still have to do the session and whatever. And you're like, no, it's magical. Remember, like you had a flow state day and this is how you felt. Like that's what you it's like a secret mojo snack that you can pull out when times are tough, right? To kind of get you going. So, all right, awesome. Flow state, destination flow state. One day the dude guys will travel to flow state. I will say your background is kind of flow statey to me. Where are we today in your background?
Leadville, Twin Lakes.
Yikes.
Can't go wrong with that. Yep.
Well, unless you're training for it and have no idea what it's like. It's awesome that I'm going to go there and do a race and I don't even recognize it. Fantastic. Flow state, also known as a state of ignorance about the doom that you're facing with your race for the season. All right. That's a topic for another day.
Alternate definition.
Alternate definition, less common, perhaps more. So, all right. So next topic, we'll go with mine, which is the continuous glucose monitoring. So, I was all about, I have GCN Plus. I got it on some crazy subscription a couple of years ago, I think during the pandemic. And I've got my setup. People have asked me, because I watch it when I ride on Zwift. And what I do is I have my this laptop right here. And I take my phone, put it into GCN. I got to go into VPN. I got to go VPN to GCN because flow state on the bike indoors has a lot of acronyms. So I put that on my laptop, like just above the keyboard here, so I can see the Zwift that I'm riding, but I've also got GCN here and GCN in my headphones. And so I was watching a couple Saturdays ago, Strada Bianchi, which is one of the early season gravel races, 1-day stage race in Italy, Tuscany region. Beautiful race, super challenging. And I was watching the women's race because guys racing is kind of meh. But I think women's racing is like if guys racing is like professional sports, women's racing is like collegiate sports, which is like just scrappier. The competition is more evenly distributed. You don't have super teams like you do on the men's professional side. I feel like the men's professional side is kind of evolved like from a financial and organizational side much more deeply, or I guess matured would be a word or something like that. But the women's scene is much more dynamic, and they've got some great characters out there too. And the best part is, I don't know, I can look at a professional male cyclist and be like, that one's got the juice, like that one's a thoroughbred, and this one is like a workhorse, or this one does a whatever. I can kind of tell by looking at those body types. On the women's side, I have no idea. I'm like, oh my God, look at that woman, she's crushing it. How is she doing it? How is she biking so fast, so strong? It doesn't look like what she's doing right now should be able to happen. It just seems more magical to me. So anyway, I'm watching the women's race because it's so much more exciting to me. And Kristen Faulkner was leading the race for quite a bit towards the end, and then got passed by two teammates from another team, maybe from Jumbo-Visma, and ended up getting third on the day. So she didn't win. But the day after the race, I went to go back and like watch the highlights and, see what was going on. And of course I go to the news and it says she might be disqualified because they could see on her, jersey up at the top, there was like underneath her jersey, there was this circle, which is like a trademark sort of sign that someone's wearing continuous glucose monitor. And UCI has banned those under their rules. And sure enough, like another 2 days later, UCI just weighed in and said, yeah, she's disqualified. She can't race with a continuous glucose monitor. Those of you who don't know, it's basically like a skin-worn device. It's, adhesive to your skin. You can wear it for weeks, depending. Sometimes people wear it for months at a time. And what it does is it tells you what your blood glucose level is at any time. So for athletes, it helps them, sort of moderate their nutrition, make better sort of overall dietary decisions, et cetera. But it's not really like a telemetry device that we have for like a power meter, so there's power meters on people's bikes and those transmit. You've probably seen them on some broadcasts. So you've been seeing an attack and then you can see the watts on the screen. They're like, oh, he's pushing 7,000 million gigahertz watts, which we all say at home. Like I could totally do that. And then we can't, there's no way we could ever do it, but it's kind of neat to see, right? Like, oh, he's doing 500 watts. I did 500 watts once. And then you're like, oh, he did 500 watts for 27 minutes and 33 seconds. I'm like, can't do that. No way. So I was a little thrown off by the whole continuous glucose monitoring thing. So I had to do some research and kind of take a look at what it was about. And it turns out that Super Sapiens, that's the company that sort of has created this device. I don't think they're FDA approved right now. I don't know if you're in the know about that or whatnot. But it's definitely like, it's been around for a while, I guess, is kind of the thing to know, right? So there's another company called Levels, which also makes it. So I'm just kind of going to the web to take a look at it, et cetera. what they're trying to do. So this is what they're saying on like just reading about it, what the story is. And first of all, just for backdrop, like it's been around for a while. Like Chris Froome has used it. He used it to kind of get back to his race weight when he was coming back from injury. Let's see here. Here's another one. The female riders have said that it allows them to manage body composition through the roller coastering demands of the menstrual cycle. Others have used the data to speed bounce back from jet lag. Some felt like better nutrition led to better sleep and recovery. Those are all sort of like long-term things, right? Like it's not like I'm all of a sudden just changing something and it changes my race. But interestingly, after this most recent ban where I got all fired up about it, I'm like, what the heck's going on? So one of the Hannah Barnes, who's a former Canyon SRAM rider, she said, if riders could see their glucose scores in race, then it would allow them to know what they need to eat and when. So if they were planning to, do an attack or they needed to be strong at the end, having like live glucose numbers on their bicycle computer could tell them, hey, I need to eat something now, whereas otherwise I might not eat something. And that could be a difference maker for people. So in the past we've seen like the difference would be this. And this is what I'm trying to wrap my head around. We've seen races where someone's going full gas and having a great race, and then all of a sudden they're done, right? They just sit up and they're like, they've cracked, right? And I think when people have said like, oh, he's cracked. Oh no, he's going backwards through the peloton. It's terrible. He's and I love the analogies, right? He's a sack of rocks tied to a balloon that a child set free at one point in time, but it's come crashing back down to earth. Oh, it's horrifying. Also, here's a cathedral. Have you seen this cathedral? It's from the 14th century. This is where, obviously the printing press was invented and so on. Oh, it's devastating. I love professional cycling. And if you don't watch the commentary, you have to, because it's amazing. But it's not like they just cracked, like my legs don't turn anymore. It's a nutritional problem, right? Like that's, I think, is one of the few gray areas left in professional cycling where sometimes you're a human being. Like you just can't do the thing anymore. And so I guess, while a power meter tells me what I'm riding at, it doesn't give me insight as to like what I could do next. Whereas a glucose meter, a continuous glucose monitor, could potentially do that. All right. I try to set it up and give some information to it. Do you buy it? Do you think it's actually like really useful? Or you're like, no, just have more of the, European Wunderbar, not sweet at all, terribly gross, disgusting, but effective energy patches when you're in trouble?
So, I'll give you a lame answer. I don't know. When I read about her story, she was wearing the patch. She knew that it was, problematic, but she didn't have any real time telemetry, right? So she just has those patches are relatively unique, or just because they're using the same patch that a diabetic would use. And typically they give like, data updates like every 15 minutes or half an hour or something like that. But the deal with Super Sapiens is they give updates every minute. So just the resolution on the data is so much greater. Right. Like, okay, great. So they would know when to eat. All right, great. Ironman doesn't they let you use them. So Ironman, you could still race with that patch and that's not a problem. When I looked at some of the studies and I think Alex Hutchinson from Outside, he does a pretty good job of like taking some of that technology and looking at it. He did an article back in, I think 2019 or something like that of, how professional athletes have been using them. When he looked at that data, it's not just as clear as just, blood sugar in the, in your bloodstream because of the dynamics associated with, you got glycogen in your muscles, you got your liver can release glucose and glycogen, and so the whole energy dynamic is a little bit, more nuanced than just, hey, what's your blood sugar level? And then the duration of the race matters too, right? So like in shorter races, you use muscle glycogen stuff over 3 or 4 hours, it makes a difference. And then the other part was athletes really, if you're talking about like looking at data from like a Whoop or like an heart rate monitor or like Oura Ring or an HR or Whoop, where they become super personalized, like the glucose monitor is also super personalized. So it's not like you just can put that thing on and be like, oh, look, I need to eat. Like, you need to know what your numbers are relative to what in those conditions before. So it's not like you just slap the thing on and you're like, oh, I need to take a goo.
Right.
The argument from UCI on banning it, I thought was just kind of lame. They were kind of like, we banned it because we don't want bike racing to become Formula One. And I'm like, that's kind of a lame excuse. People have power meters. Why can't you know when to eat? You can know when to put out power. I don't know why it seemed like a lame reason why you wouldn't be able to use one. But I think their use is not necessarily super straightforward, if that makes sense. Like you'd have to have some skills and some analysis to be able to just put the patch, once you put the patch on, to be able to use it. Yeah, I think because Ironman still lets you use it, I think we could probably see some good use cases of, like, yes, it's a useful tool and should be included in racing, versus UCI saying no, it's just, we want to see guys bonk, so bonking is interesting. We want to see guys bonk. Don't let them know when they need to eat.
Right. Oh, it's the placebo car. They don't realize this team car has no carbohydrates in it. It's got bottles that look and taste like fuel, but there's no energy. Let's see how long they last with this one. Ha ha. Like it's the Hunger Games meets professional cycling. I love it. Those aren't actually excited fans. Those are people with real sticks. They're actually trying to put the sticks in the wheels of these cyclist wheels. Like, will they survive the gauntlet? I hear you.
So yeah, I guess I haven't seen enough guys racing with it to say that it would be a detriment to racing versus, but like what Alex, based on what Alex wrote, 4 years ago at this point, though, it's very personalized for those athletes to be able to know what they need to do at that particular time.
Yes, totally. Yeah, I agree. Like just think about it, like for us with our age group athletes, like when they go do a race rehearsal and they come back and they're like, I hate, you said, Patrick, use Gatorade Endurance because it's on the race course. I hate it because it makes me get sick. And so I'm getting rid of it. And instead I went on the internet and I found a witch's brew that consists of, crumbled pine cones and Tide detergent, actually, which is apparently poisonous, but not right now. When I used it in this formula with apple juice, baby food, and then something that I can only buy at a hardware store, which I can't tell you right now. And it's fine. And I'll just totally use that. Like people go from like normal to crazy, right? You never go to a restaurant and be like, oh, you're out of lasagna. How about you take some cooking oil and then mix it with powder that I've got in this bag, and then also like sprinkle in stuffing that whatever is in the chef's left pocket, not the right pocket, and then I'll eat that. Like, you're like, you would never do that, but we do it when we're athletes, right? For some unknown reason. And honestly, I think a lot of times when people break down on that nutritional side, it's not like, everyone, sure, everyone's got a sort of a different palate for nutrition, but it's not like Gatorade has been making shit products for the last 20 years and just tricking people into eating them. It works. My guess is there's a lot of user error. So the thing that I would be excited about as a coach for a CGM is to actually be like, not just because it's hard for us to get compliance even on the consumption of calories, right? To also then be able to say like, hey, how did your body respond to the calories you were taking in? So we see when the power drops at the end of a ride, but if we could see like, like glycogen plummeted in hour 2, and, sure enough, like right as rain, 30 minutes later, we started to see those power numbers come down. When you ate something at hour 3, when you finally got to a gas station, everything went back up again and you were better, right? So we could kind of see that and then use that information to go to the athlete and say, when you're fueled, you're better. Because I have this conversation all the time, especially with female athletes who are like, I don't really need to eat as much. Like I don't want to gain weight when I'm exercising. And so I'm just, I think I'm pretty good with whatever this ridiculous mixture is that's not made for athletic performance. And then, you'll have rides where they have to, something changes, right? Like I left work and I was going to do this workout and I hadn't eaten all day at work. So I was like, you know what, fine, I'll just have one of these stupid bars. And then I set a personal best. And you're like, interesting, right? Like it's all anecdotal, right? And especially you're relying on the athlete revealing information. the athlete understanding what you're saying and then executing on the bike with all those pieces. So I feel like having a CGM for training and then also just learning yourself. Right? I did a big bike ride this morning. I'm super excited to say that I left that bike ride. I've had a Fig Newton and just a large coffee, and have not eaten anything else since. So I'm totally dying. And there's probably something that I'm missing here in terms of like taking care of my body through this process. And I think a CGM from a macro scale would work. So I think if you got really good at, if you were a smart athlete who could use that information with your coach or on your own to figure out your personal needs and the things that do work for you. Like if you could figure out like, ooh, what's my go-to in the second half of a long ride? Or what's the best fuel I could have before running, right? Maybe you don't want to spike your glycogen at a specific point. So you want to change things up, right? Or when your stomach went wrong, you could go back and be like, oh, I see what I did there. And it's easy to parse through the different elements that could have caused that problem. You know, some people would say, oh, it's just hot. So that was the problem, right? Or I had too much water, or it kind of eliminates a lot of that to just kind of dial in on this one variable, say what doesn't make you successful. I'm with you. Like, honestly, I feel like if professional racing was more like Formula One, I think it would be even more successful. I think people want to see all the numbers, all the data. They want to just, it kind of reveals the behind the scenes of the race. I don't know if the athletes always have to have the data themselves. I mean, that's a question for, someone else, I guess. But I think it would be from on the home side, it would be awesome because I love the data racing. Like, for example, even just now looking at the terrain, if I've got a map on the bottom of my screen and I can see the riders racing and I can see what team's in the front or who's doing what. And then I look at the terrain and I look at the riders. I'm like, oh, there's a breakaway. It's 4 minutes. It's a climb. It's 10 kilometers long, but it's into a headwind. I'm putting all this data together and I'm making like a story about what's going to happen. And I'm like, oh, is my story going to play out? Right. Because I'm kind of looking at things like that. I know the teams are strategizing and I'm thinking, right. When you don't have that kind of data, you're like, oh my God, he's winning. Oh, he's not winning. Someone else is winning. Like, that's fantastic. Ooh, he is no longer winning. It's harder for me as the person watching to understand. Whereas when we look at, say, something like the NFL, professional football, like, oh, it's third down. The coach like swaps out like, player 1, 2, 3 for player 4, 5, 6, and they all line up on the left and the quarterback changes. You've got a different cadence for the call. They've got a specific strategy for that specific situation. I believe that level of nuance happens in pro cycling and we could see it happening on the screen and we could sort of, again, I think it really brings the viewer in. So I'm actually all for professional cycling being more Formula One like. Like, sure, you can have, then if you get all Formula One like, then we can have retro races, right? Then we can be like, we go old school. You can have the whole old school tour, Who's that crazy cyclist who decided to race the Tour de France to Paris 2 years ago?
Oh, yeah.
Was it Lachlan?
Lachlan Morton. Yeah, it was going to do even the transfers. He rode the stages and the transfers, just the entire tour. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he rode everything. Yeah. Which is awesome. Other guys were riding in a bus. He was riding on his bike. He was riding on his bike, right? So I'm like, that's awesome. Like, let's do something like that where you have to get from point A to point B. I'll tell you this here. I'll run this right by you right now. We're already over time. I have to go. But so normally I do a ride. I organize a ride here in Rhode Island. I've done it for 3 years. Haven't done it for the past 2-3 years, maybe not because of the pandemic. It was a fundraising ride called Brewing Good out of a local brewery, and we go out for a ride, and I'm like, people sign up, raise money, give it to charity, and then you also get this cool bike ride, whatever, fun. Well, this year the charity folks are like, they're not really that interested in doing a ride. They're kind of figuring out their own thing, which is fine. So I was like, if I don't have the mojo of the brand and the team, I'm not going to get a lot of people there. And then I was like, ooh. The Barkley Marathon just happened. And the cool thing they do there is they've got this crazy ass course you got to go out and figure out on your own. And you have to, part of the Barkley Marathon lore is you get a number and there's a book out on the course, there's several books, and you have to kind of get a page from that book as you go through the loop. When you come back, you have to show that you were there because you have to turn in your page. If you're number 17, you got to bring page 17 back with you. If you don't have page 17, that loop doesn't count. That got me thinking. I was like, maybe instead of getting all crazy with this ride, I'm pitching you on this. What if I did a ride that you didn't get the route until the morning of? You knew it was going to be somewhere between, say 50 and 60 miles of riding. It's going to be on-road, off-road stuff, gravel bike friendly. So you get the route the morning of when you showed up and checked in. And you'd also get, because WhatsApp lets you do it, the 3 words,
which allows you to do the geolocation. So you get a WhatsApp message that gave you the geolocation of the book or whatever. And as you were doing the ride, you'd have to like use your phone to find the thing to get your page out of it to come back. And so if you survive the ride on your own, like but if you're actually able to get like the pages, maybe you get something cooler. Like it's more like sort of part adventure meets part bike ride. I don't know, like make it a little less of a mystery as opposed to making it so normal. And just see who shows up to kind of do the thing. You know, I could trick a couple people into doing it with me, but I'd be curious. What do you think? Should I go into the woods and hide books and trick people into going into there and doing it on their bikes and doing some adventurous stuff? Or is this just a crazy bad idea?
I mean, it definitely appeals to the adventure crowd and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's a growing crowd of folks that are looking to go do stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's potential.
Plus beer. Plus, every time I plan a route anyway, those of you who don't know at home, every time I plan a route for a camp or myself or whatever, there's always, I end up on some part of road that is not a real road. So I do that naturally. So why not just embrace my skill I have at putting riders in really unreasonable positions on bicycles and just tell them to bring a bicycle that allows them to ride on practically anything. And then they'll be okay. I'll turn my weakness into a strength. That's what I'll do.
Love it.
All right, I gotta think about that one. All right, well, we're kind of at time. We're already at like 40 minutes here on the DudeGuy podcast, so we're not going to get to the benchmarking thing, but we can come back to it. But I think we need. I'm just going to say, I think the fans are going to hit us up, obviously on the YouTube channel, podcast channel. They're going to be like, you guys need to talk about more current events. So we're gonna have to find some more current event type stuff to get into. What do you think?
I'm good. Yeah, we can do that.
You're good. All right, I promise. I pinky promise that the next DudeGuy podcast, I'll show up with 3 topics, or you get to pick the workout I have to do as punishment. As long as it's not a hybrid bicycle ride, I'm down with it. You'll be like Tabatas till tomorrow.
There'll be a hybrid bicycle ride that you need to go find pages out of a random convenience stores in Rhode Island. Totally
done. There's not a lot of, actually, some might argue that the book density matches the population density of Rhode Island. I'm amazed at how small. Like, people think about Kansas and you're like, oh, Kansas is huge. It's enormous, right? And there's a lot of places where there aren't people. I'm amazed at how even in small places like Rhode Island, there's huge swaths of Rhode Island where there's really no people whatsoever. Like, you can instantly be like, a couple miles, you're like, I'm in the middle of nowhere.
Fact check you on that. Right, I think Rhode Island's just densely packed with people, and like it's just a tiny little state.
No, yeah, it's not. Like, first of all, my town only has 4 people in it, right? I'm just saying, right? We still want a monorail, though. We're going to get a monorail one day in my town and solve all of our problems because monorail. Actually, funny note on that. So when I'm riding on Zwift, I've got like YouTube on the side. Like, I'll be clicking through YouTube and Twitter or whatever as I get distracted and I'm not in my flow state and I'm like angry. So I just distract myself when I'm angry. And there was like a Simpsons one. And it had like a bunch of sort of like Simpson clips on stuff. I can't remember what the theme was. Oh my God, it took me back. I used to be the biggest Simpsons fan, and I got to scroll through like 5 minutes of like Simpson highlights. It was awesome. It was so good. Simpsons are so good. Anyway, all right. With that, thank you so much for tuning in for the DudeGuy podcast. We'll be back next time with more current events, more fun stuff. So stay tuned, and thanks for being a part of it.
Yeah.
For more information about Endurance Nation, visit us online at endurancenation.us. The provided music is from the Podshow Podsafe Music Network. Check it out at music.podshow.com.